I'm Dane Rose, and in this exploration we're going to look at the field of systems. And the field of systems, all systems emerge from the whole, emerge from the one, emerge on the geometric dimension from the sphere, the totality. And so we start off with the unconscious one, the unconscious whole, the unconscious sphere. And it moves into consciousness through distinction in the form of language. All consciousness, all human consciousness, is predicated on the language, which is a series of distinctions. It's a process of dividing the whole into parts, naming the parts, and contrasting one part with another. So you have a language of distinctions. Now the distinction can be a shape, it can be a number, it can be a color, it can be a smell, but whatever it is, on whatever continuum those distinctions are occurring, they're becoming conscious through language. Now, you can look geometrically at the process of different systems. The simplest system is breaking the whole into two, or a binary system. So you have what was one, the unconscious one, is now two. That two can be up and down. It can be yin and yang. It can be black and white. It can be good and bad. But you've now got a binary system. And binary systems are problematic, particularly when we overlay cult values on top of the system. Black is bad, white is good, or this is half of reality is good and half of reality is bad. Because when you break the whole into two, the nature of possibility dictates that the two are equal in mass, in size. Whatever your distinction is, if it's black and white, for example, the possibility field that exists around reality dictates that there is as much possibility for black as there is for white. So the two are always equal. Now, the one is an ecological synergy. If you look at the Earth, for example, well, it's an ecological synergy. How effective would it be to cut the Earth into two and then say half of the Earth is good and half of the Earth is bad? Let's get rid of the half that's bad, whatever half that is. And now the rest of the world of the Earth can continue existing. Well, it doesn't work that way. First of all, the spherical orbit is predicated on there being a whole, not two halves. Secondly, the amount of volatility in that orbit and in the spinning might be untenable. What happens with all the rivers that were flowing from one half and now have no place to flow because the other half was removed? What about the weather? And so you get a lot of problems when you break away or break the whole into two and then create the illusion of garbage, which just means that the mind observing the energy pattern lacks the sophistication to do anything intelligent with it. That's all garbage is. It doesn't exist in reality, but we pretend that large amounts of human remains or human-influenced materials. We take vast amounts of ecological materials from the environment. We change them into stuff we don't know what to do with, and then we dig big holes in the ground and we pretend that garbage exists. Garbage is energy in a form created by human beings that human beings do not know what to do with. So garbage doesn't exist, a lack of imagination exists, a lack of intelligence, a lack of competency exists, not garbage. Energy is just energy, and a sophisticated mind can do something intelligent, can create sustainable well-being with all forms of energy. Physicists will explain that energy is not created or destroyed. It just goes through an endless cycle of permutations. This energy turns into this energy, turns into this energy, turns into this energy. And the sophisticated mind can do something intelligent with all forms of energy at all stages of their permutation. Intelligence being the efficiency with which energy is transformed into sustainable well-being. So there is no garbage. There are just consciousnesses who lack the ability to do something intelligent with large sections of reality. And because it feels a little better for a human being to call something garbage rather than their thinking garbage, we project the inadequacy of thought out onto the inadequacy of parts of reality, and nobody argues because most of us have the same problem. We don't know what to do with all those plastic bags either. We know how to make them. We know what to do with them initially, but then we don't know what to do with them. And we don't know, so we just all agree to call larger and larger portions of our ecological framework a name that is absolutely meaningless other than that we all don't know what to do with it. So you have a system that gets created. It could be a binary system, a trinary system, a five-point system. The whole is broken into parts. And we're conscious of the parts. We are not conscious of the whole. We're conscious of the parts. Now, all systems are interconnected with the fabric of reality. It's much like countries. You can think of the system of geography where we take the whole planet and we say, okay, this is ours and that's yours. Okay, all very well and good. Except the wind is part of the ecology. The smoke that is made in factories in this plot of land blows over into this plot of land. The nuclear radiation of the meltdown in Japan comes down and affects the entire world. So we can pretend, for the sake of consciousness, for the sake of developing a system of breaking space down into compartmentalized bits, that they are distinct. But in reality, every part is inextricably linked on multiple dimensions with the whole of which it is a part, which doesn't fit into the system. So this creates a series of frustrations. It guarantees friction, because this is our system and this is reality, and they don't match up. The system, by definition, can never encompass the entirety of reality. And whatever it leaves out, and different systems leave out different bits, whatever it leaves out still influences that which is within the system in a way that is somewhat unconscious, and thus somewhat unpredictable, and thus at times somewhat traumatic. because our models of reality don't work all of the time. So let's look at a couple of truths that kind of tie in here. There's a good segue into that. So number one, all systems are heuristic models of reality. They're not reality. So you can think of Google Maps. The map is not reality. It is a heuristic model of pieces of reality. It's a good model to predict what street is coming next. It's a bad model for counting the needles on the pine trees you just drove by. Second, all systems are imperfect lies. It's good to know that all human thought, which is a system of thinking through language, a system of perception through language, is not only imperfect, but in its imperfection is a lie. It cannot be trusted in the same way that the one, that the totality, that the ineffable, that which is outside the system can be trusted. All systems bring about language-based consciousness. So the one, the isness, the all that is, that we're each inextricably connected to, does not bring about language and consciousness. I mean, there's not much to say. You know, if someone asks you a question and your response is totality, how old are you? Totality. What's your name? Totality. Who are you? One. There's no consciousness. It's like, I'm trying to get at this bit and this bit and this bit through language, right? So all systems bring language-based consciousness into being. And all human thought is language-based consciousness. You and I cannot think a single thought without using words to house and structure the consciousness in the thought. We think through the vehicle of language, and language is a system of distinctions. Now, we do not have large portions of reality registering in language. And I'll give you an example. The Eskimos have 400 words for snow. So when we say snow, everyone, for the most part, has a different image of snow. I'm seeing powder in the mountains, you're seeing this, you're seeing muddy streets. Everyone has a different image for snow. But when you have 400 words for snow, because your life depends on knowing whether the snow you're talking about is ice turning watery with a little bit of powder falling, or is powder that has been iced, thawed, and re-iced. Those two distinctions on a 4-hour sled journey at 40 degrees below zero make the difference between life and death. And so, you know, when life is on the line, we tend to develop greater awareness of the variables upon which life depends. Eskimos depend on the habits of snow and so have 400 words for it. The same is true with love. There are at least 400 types of love, but we don't have 400 words for love. So it's actually become a little bit of a dirty word for some people, because for some people love is cross-wired and actually means abuse. For other people it means dependency in a cult that shames dependency. So if that's what comes up around the word, then it's a dirty word in a cult that shames, those traits. All systems allow some things to work while causing problems in other areas. All systems have a function based on intention. So the system of hunting, for example, could be an intention of sport, could be an intention of living, could be an intention of losing weight. I mean, it depends on the cultural context, but all systems have a function based on an intention. An intention gives rise to the system. Capitalism, for example, has the intention of making hardworking people who produce products rich. And you can apply different intentions on different systems. The system of mathematics has an intention of being able to predict the future more reliably, among other things. Because, for example, mathematics allows you to say, I want to cut this board reliably to fit this space. So I'm going to measure this space using fractions of space. If you're in the US, you use feet and inches. If you're other places in the world, you use meters and centimeters. But I'm going to measure the space, and I'm going to measure the board, and then I'm going to cut the board at the same point on the tape measure as the space. And the system of mathematics allows me to predict the relationship of the board to the space with more accuracy than I could without the system. Otherwise, who wants to learn mathematics? Unless it allows you to predict the future in a way that conserves energy and yields higher levels of well-being. All systems are limited, but the space between and around the systems is infinite. So you have the infinite, the timeless, the spaceless, the one. And then you have the system of time, the system of space. Now, within the system of space, let's just take two measurements, right? So there's this point and there's this point. Let's say this is a foot, right? And that's your increment of measurement. Now, you've got a limit here. You've got a foot, this point to this point. But the space between is infinite. You can cut this space in half, and 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 then cut that in half, and then cut that in half, infinitely. Same with time. This is a second of time. Here and here, you've got a boundary. But you can enter timeless moments where time seems to freeze, where vertical consciousness enters in. And we see this with dreams, for example, where in a matter of a few seconds, weeks can go by in a vivid dream. So, how much time, how much consciousness can you fit into a second? Well, with lineal consciousness, not necessarily very much. But the space in between, atoms, you have two little points of energy composing an atom spinning around each other, but 99% space. So the system is limited, but the space in between and around the system is limitless. It doesn't fit into the systems used to define them. So we start out with the unconscious whole, and we move into distinction with language, which can be in the form of shapes or numbers or words. And then we encounter friction. And here's how it works in any system. So let's take this, we'll start with this triangle here. So this is a system. You've got three distinctions in this system. Let's say this is 1, 2, and 3. Now, the options within this system are limited. You can stay on one, or you can move counterclockwise around 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Or you can pause on 2, or you can pause here. That's kind of the range of that system. Now, here's the problem. Let's say you need to do something in this space over here. The space is not illuminated within this particular system. Or let's say you need to get to the middle here. How do you get to the middle within this system? Meaning you feel this tug towards centering. You feel this tug towards the middle. You go here and you're not in the middle. You go here and you're not in the middle. And you go here and you're not in the middle. So you go back and you're not in the middle. And up and not in the middle. And down and you can go around this system infinitely, in infinite positions, and you never get to the center. Because this particular system of refracting reality into 3 distinctions doesn't take us to the middle. So you get frustration because you want to get to the middle, but your system takes you everywhere but the middle. You've got friction. This is the third stage of relating to a system. Now, that friction leads to heightened consciousness, frustration, pain, creates friction, creates consciousness, which leads to evolution. Now, evolution of every system moves in a series of continuums in a general direction. So the first shape that evolution takes is complexity, a movement towards complexity. So, for example, if you evolve the 3-pointed system to a 5-pointed system, one of the things you'll notice is you've gotten closer to the center here. So you have a little bit of relief, things moved forward. But you're still locked in this 5-pointed system. You're not touching the center, you're just closer than you were with the triangle. So you go round and round and round and round. It's interesting, right? Because you've got 5 points, not as boring, right? You've got 5 points of this system rather than 3 points. So you go round and round and round. You still don't totally get to the center. And so you move towards complexity. The next thing you move towards is symmetry. Why symmetry? Well, you can think of intelligence as the efficiency with which energy is transformed into sustainable well-being, energy taking the form of time or money or natural resources or attention. And if you think of a bicycle wheel, you're using human energy, so it's hard work. So bicycles are designed with efficiency in mind. So first of all, they use wheels, not squares, not triangles. They use circles. The circle is the most graceful shape for transporting energy from one space to another. So, and the circle is, of course, infinite. And you could have all the spokes of the wheel on one side, but then it would collapse. The wheel would start to wobble and become asymmetrical. Now, when you have an asymmetrical wheel, like a watermelon shape, it takes 10 times more energy for the bicyclist to move through the system because it's elongated, it's asymmetrical. So one of the things in system evolution that takes place that's healthy is it moves from simplicity to complexity, from asymmetry to symmetry. It moves towards beauty, which is another vehicle, another lens for perceiving symmetry. For example, the most attractive faces they've shown on instinct gut-based computer screens of lots of faces are symmetrical faces. So you move towards beauty with symmetry. You move towards grace with symmetry. You move towards truth with symmetry. You move towards goodness. Now, all human beings, all consciousness in the history of humanity, have wanted to feel sustainably good and avoid feeling chronically bad. And one of the metrics on that equation of what feels sustainably good and what feels chronically bad is intelligence. Intelligence is the efficiency with which time, money, and natural resources is transformed into human well-being. It feels good when you do something efficiently. It feels cruddy to spend all day doing something that doesn't work and in fact makes your life worse. You did all this stuff, and the feedback is that you're in more pain than if you hadn't done it. In other words, you're not intelligent. You're spending large amounts of energy to reduce your sustainable well-being. And so the movement is towards complexity, symmetry, beauty, grace, truth, and goodness. And this is an infinite continuum. The binary system becomes the trinary system, becomes the cubist system, the 4-point system, the 5-point system, the 6-point system. The circle that's not very circular becomes a little bit more symmetrical, more graceful. Now, at the end of the system, or at some point on the journey of perfecting the system, we transcend the system. We transcend the set of which we're a part. As human beings, we come into the set as infants and gradually, build our intelligence and do all that we possibly can within our lifetime, and then we die. We leave the form. We start off trying to make money or whatever it is, and at some point we give it away or become less interested in money. We transcend the system. Because you can look at systems like paradigms where you enter into the system, experience varying degrees of discomfort, and evolve within the system. And then finally you get interested in another system. You become a great cultural icon or whatever it is within your system, and then you become interested in other cultures. You learn all about the planet, and you start being interested in outer space. So the last step in working with a system is to transcend the system, which is to move beyond its bounds. And so this is something that happens in every sphere of life. Education goes through this process. Science goes through this process. Both the paradigm of science and an individual scientist and a given field within science all work within this set of different systems. Now, the purpose of every paradigm is to reveal and make possible certain realities, certain experiences that the paradigm and system predisposes. So, for example, the paradigm of oil on canvas. Why canvas? Why oil? Why not watercolor on paper? Well, that's another paradigm. Each system, the paradigm of capitalism, the paradigm of economics, whatever it is, each system predisposes certain experiences. For example, give someone a brush, lock them in a room, here's a bunch of canvas, here's a bunch of oil paints and brushes do something. We'll see you next year. Well, most of the time you come back a year later and there is oiled paint on some of those canvases. What it is exactly is very different, but within a given paradigm, certain experiences are predisposed. Now, the paradigm of set theory is that everyone involved in a particular reality is part of the set with its system of probabilities. So every paradigm has a possibility field, a probability field. The set is defined by the identities or roles of everyone in a particular reality. So education, what's the roles? Well, we've got teachers, we've got administrators, we've got students, we've got these types of students, etc. So it's defined by the identities or roles of everyone in that set, in that paradigm. The set is brought into motion by the paradigms, including beliefs, which combine to create thoughts and feelings, which lead to choosing behaviors that make sense within that particular set or paradigm. Now, the paradigm of set theory is that everyone involved is involved as an equal and as a participant, either by causing the reality that they're in or allowing the reality, the feminine and masculine pole. In a chauvinistic system, the people who cause the reality are held responsible and given the power and given the praise, and the people who allow the reality are irrelevant, right? Because within chauvinism, the masculine trait is emphasized. So causing something is where all the attention is, and allowing it meaningless. And this is one of the reasons why we blame our politicians. We don't blame the country for allowing the amount of stupidity and corruption that we see. Instead, we blame the politicians for causing the corruption, etc. It's part of the masculine bias. Each set generates a statistical probability field on each dimension that is measured within the set. For example, in the dimension of domestic relationships, 33% of domestic relationships in the United States contain aspects of domestic abuse. And 78% of workers are living paycheck to paycheck. So if you look at all of the variables in the system that is the United States, we look at the education system, which, for example, does not include a single hour of relational literacy, a single hour of traumatic literacy. And you say, well, if as part of the educational system, the citizens, in the role of followers within the cult, do not receive a single competent hour of training towards healing and well-being in relationships, that this unconsciousness, this de-emphasis on feminine terrain, such as relationships, results in a probability field that says that if you've got 3 couples in a room, statistically one of them is going to be hurting each other in the way that we've classified and defined as some form of domestic abuse. Every set has a process of entry, development, and exit. So, within this set, you enter the set from the 1, and let's say you divide it into 3. And then you say that's not complicated enough. It's too simple. We have to turn it into the 3-sided triangle becomes the six-sided star, right? Or whatever it is that we evolve. And then eventually you transcend the system. Someone comes into the earth, they're born into a body, they develop their body and talents and mind, etc., and then they leave their body at death. And so you have the entrance, the development, and the exit. Now, at the beginning of entering any new system, and one of the easiest ways is to look at the system of human life. So you have birth, and so the beginning as consciousness enters a system, from unconsciousness to beginning to become conscious, the first state of entry correlates with innocence, correlates with the innocence of a child, correlates with the mindset of the victim, correlates with the mindset of openness and yes. So a child comes into a given family and they're completely innocent and they're a yes to whatever it is that's going on. You know, every child learns the language that their parents are speaking. They're a yes to. Now, we only have a few hundred languages active on the planet today. But if there were 10 million languages, the child would learn any of them. It's a complete, unequivocal yes to what's going on. Now, this is also correlates with the state of the dialogue that is sympathy. So you have the innocence, the child. Now, of course, if there's complete innocence and helplessness, you have a victim mentality. Dad hit the baby. The baby feels self-pity or hurt. There's nothing the baby can do about it. So you have the state of victimhood as part of the unequivocal yes and innocence. Then you move into the counterpoint, which is the adolescent state, which is the state of the rebel, which is the state of no, which is the state of antithesis. And you also have the state of the perpetrator. You know, the child, you know, the 5-year-old who was hit and bullied and humiliated by dad may become the 15-year-old who hits and bullies the other. So the victim becomes the perpetrator, the yes becomes the no, the compliance becomes the rebel, the sympathy becomes the antipathy. And so you have, you know, the next stage of human consciousness. And then you move into the adult state, which is the state of the witness. Now you have synthesis, a mix of yes and no correlated to observed and internalized experience. I'm going to take this bit and reject that bit. Today I'm going to do this, and another time I'm going to do this. And then finally you have transcending the set. As the adult takes their last breath, and all that energy that formed that consciousness moves somewhere out of the set. Now, every human set has a series of roles, and the highest role of any set is the teacher about the set, the way shower, the shaman who is half in the set and half out of the set, the one who is part in the spirit world, part in this world, the one who is part in this country, part in that country. The way shower that helps to define the set, evolve the set, and guide people out of the set in the function of transcendence. Now, an example of a set would be musical chairs. So the set of musical chairs says that there will be one less chair whenever the music stops playing. And so if you start off with 100 people playing musical chairs, the first time 99 still have chairs and there's one person who's losing. At the last bit of musical chairs, you have a 50-50 chance of losing because there's two people and one chair. And so within that set, it moves from a 1% loss at the beginning of the game, and more percentage of people playing the game lose until you've got 50-50 odds, and then there's only one winner in 100. So you've got a 1% victory in the set that is musical chairs. And so the way shower guides people to the edge of the set. The teacher shows the boundaries of the set and the mechanics of the set. The innovator improves the design of the set in the direction of intelligence. And the shaman, or the priest, helps guide people out of the sets that they find themselves into a greater sense of freedom through transcendence. The fear of the unknown, predicated by trauma, determines the willingness to understand, grow, and transcend a set. Every set has limitations in the form of boundaries, while enabling specific possibilities. The movement from one set to another in any dimension, such as beliefs, tends towards conscious mastery, as long as more and more of reality is embraced in the new set. The movement, or every set, is both inside us and outside of us if we are in the set. We may be in the set as a victim, a perpetrator, a withholder, a blamer, a teacher, and each of these faces of the set are inside and outside of us. The feminine and masculine in a set are equal, causing and allowing, initiating and responding, speaking and listening. Every set is imperfect, incomplete, and includes as a result some pain, some separation from, and some longing for the totality of what is. To gain mastery within the sets we are in, we move as follows: from unconsciousness to consciousness, from child to adult, from victim to way-shower, shaman, and innovator, from self-centeredness to other-centeredness, from isolation to synergy, from pain to love, and from low levels of intelligence to conscious fun. This has been fun going through system theory with you, and I'll see you around.